So for the button code module, we're going to create a simple program that will be able to turn or to toggle the blue LEDs whenever the button is pressed. It's pretty simple, but there are a number of ways which it can be accomplished.
So we're going to go ahead and begin by opening a new project in MPLABX. And we'll go ahead and begin by including the button.h library. If you don't know how to set up this starting point for coding with the NESI board, there is another video out demonstrating that, so you can go ahead and check that out if you don't know how to set this up. So I'm just going to do a # include, and then I'm going to do button.h. And that's all we really need for our button includes. Now we can go ahead and initialize this by just calling the button.init function. So as I mentioned, there are a couple of different methods of going about this program, and the first we're going to address is actually identifying whether the button is pressed, and then determining from that data the keystrokes of the button. So it's kind of a lower level approach, and it's really kind of the fundamental of the other approaches that you can do to this. So we'll just go ahead and identify whether the button is pressed. And then, if it is pressed, we're just going to set a variable to say that it is pressed. And then, if it's not pressed, then we're going to check if it previously was pressed. So we're going to check that variable pressed, and if it wasn't pressed, or if it currently isn't pressed, if it just got done being pressed, then we know that that was a single keystroke. And then, if it did just get done being pressed, we want to toggle whether the the blue LEDs are on. And then finally, we want to set that pressed variable equal to false, so we don't go through the isn't pressed loop again and then see that it currently is pressed. So we just want to set the variable pressed to false. So that's really all we need. We can begin coding this by just calling a function up here. The function is button.isPressed. It's a pretty simple function. So if, I'm just going to put an if gate, button.isPressed. And that will return a boolean, or a true or false value, and it'll execute this block of code if the button is pressed. So we can go ahead and add some brackets here. And then if it is, we're going to set a variable pressed to true. Now we haven't created this variable yet, so we should go up here and create that. And it's going to be a boolean. It's going to be called pressed. And we're going to initialize it to false, because we're going to assume that as soon as the NESI board is booted up, it's not pressed. Now this is giving me an error because it should be in all capital letters. That's because if we were to right-click on Boolean and go to Navigate and go to the declaration, you'd actually see that it's defined in the NESI system.h library. It's not actually a C type. So the true and the false value is in all caps, and it's one binary digit. It's 0 or a 1. So that has to be in all caps in order for that to compile successfully. And then we're just going to set pressed equal to true. And then if the variable, and then if it isn't pressed, so we'll just go ahead and use an else statement here. So just else, and we'll put in some more brackets. And then if it just got done being pressed, we're just going to say if pressed equals true. And you do need two equal signs there because that's comparing the values. One equal sign sets pressed equal to true, and the two equal signs compares pressed and true. So, and then we'll go ahead and add another set of brackets. And then we're just going to set the variable pressed to false. So pressed. Great. So now for this toggling whether the blue LEDs are on, it's pretty easy to do. We just have to have a variable that says their current state, and then we'll just change them based on that current state. So we can find yet another boolean here. We'll call it current state, and we'll set it equal to false, because we're going to begin by having all of the LEDs off. So then we're just going to check to see if that variable is false. So if current state equals false. And then if the current state is false, then at the end we want to set current state equal to true, so the next time this block of code is executed, it'll execute what it should execute when current state is true. So we'll just set current state equal to true, and we need two equal signs up here, the if gate. And in here, if the LEDs are currently off, then we're going to turn them on. We're going to do LED_B.dutyCycle. We'll only set it to half brightness because that way it doesn't blind the camera. So we'll set it to 50% on. And otherwise, we're just going to turn them off. So LED_B.dutyCycle. And of course we have to set current state equal to false. Because if it's not false, then it's true. And if it is true, we want to set it back to false. So the next time this code executes, it will execute to the this up here instead of they will turn the LEDs on instead of turning them back off. So right now this code actually should compile and it should work on the NESI board. So you see our build is successful here, and now we can go ahead and program our NESI board.
So when we actually run this program, you can see it actually works very well.
So another way that we can actually do this is by using the button.hLibraries getStroke function. So if we remove all of this, and we'll simplify this code a lot, we'll just make it so that if a button stroke is identified, then we will toggle the blue LEDs. So for this if a button stroke is identified, before we declared a variable if it was pressed and if it wasn't pressed, and then we based on that derived whether it was just pushed. But we can use a function built into the button library called button.getStroke, and you'll notice that it returns a keystroke variable. So if we put it there and set it equal to it, it returns a keystroke, and a keystroke variable is an enumerated value. It's either keystroke single, keystroke double, or keystroke none. In this case, we want keystroke single. So this function here, getStroke, identifies the amount of keystrokes on the button since it was last called. So there will have been one button press when this function is called, and it returns true. But if there wasn't, it will return keystroke none, and since that's not matching our if gate, then it won't execute this code. And we're going to toggle the blue LEDs in much the same way. We're going to declare a variable, a Boolean variable called state, I guess. And then we're going to just identify if state equals false. Then we're just going to set state equal to true. And we'll go ahead and turn the blue LEDs on. And we'll turn them on to half power, so 50%. And else, so if state equals true, then we're just going to set state equal to false, and we're going to turn the blue LEDs off. So that code should run.
And as you can see, this code also works very well. So that's it for the button code module. If you want to attach an external button like this, it can be attached at JP14 on the NESI board.